We've been on a little bit of a hiatus to give time and space to the movement for racial equality happening in America right now. To our black producers and customers, we love you, we need you, we will keep working to build a marketplace that better serves you as independent business owners and communities. If there's anything the past few weeks has shown us as a country, it's to listen to the stories exposing racism in any and every form. At a grocery, you always get it direct from the source. And today, that means DJ, founder of Soul Pop. We sat down with her, talk about racism, how it's impacted her life, and the pain it causes. We hope you give it a listen. It sure helped us.
COVID hitting and Corona hitting was a huge uncertainty. And then we went into George Floyd being killed by police officers, and the response to that, protesting and the pain and the outpouring, to right now, in this moment. As much as this, I would love to know the community response you've seen.
Well, I think a place to start would be through the context of helping people to understand why we're all hurting.
Yeah.
Why the Black community is in so much pain over this particular death. Because if you're on the outside and you don't have to necessarily think about these issues all the time, it might be, well, this is tragic, but this is just one of many. Like, what makes this time so different? And even though on the surface that question seems kind of shallow and cynical, I think it would be fair to ask that question if it's not your reality. And my response to that is because we're tired. Like, collectively, as a community, we're all the way fed up. I don't mean sort of fed up. I mean, we're mad as hell and we're not taking it anymore fed up. You know, everything is about timing, and I don't think anybody would have wanted this to happen. But when you mix in what's happening with the pandemic and the fissures that it's exposing, and the inequities that exist, and how it's, impacting African Americans the most. And honestly, the feeling that I can't speak for every Black person in America, of course, but people in my circles and conversations that we are all having, one of the common threads was, it seemed like everybody was terrified of the coronavirus until they found out it was killing mostly Black people. And it was like, well, in that case, let's get back to work.
Yeah.
That was not okay. And so when you factored in George Floyd's death on top of that and the way he was murdered and how they played it out on national TV, yeah, we were done.
I have a question for you, and it was really framed from a dear friend of mine who lost a son a few years ago, and he told me that he didn't know that type of pain existed. And what it made him realize is that pain exists that he doesn't know anything about. And I would use that right now and say, what kind of pain does racism cause? Because as a white male in this country, I don't experience the pain of racism.
Black pain doesn't come from God. It comes from man. And we make the mistake of assuming that racism is a Black person's problem. No, it's not. Racism is a white person's problem in this country. And what I mean by that is we can't fix it for you. People will say, what is racism, and why is it that people always assume that only white people are racist? What about Black racists? What about brown racists? And I'll explain that if you'll allow me. We all have prejudices. All of us. We're born with them. We have them. Okay? We're prejudiced. I don't like anybody who plays for the New England Patriots. I am prejudiced against New England Patriots fans. I just am. That's an automatic dislike for me. But if I could then take that prejudice and use it to decide where you live how you live, what you eat, whether you live or die, the quality of your life, that's when it crosses a boundary and it stops being prejudice and it becomes racism. So in other words, racism is prejudice plus power. You cannot be a racist without power to control. If you can do something about it collectively, and in America, Black people are very, very clear. We understand from a very, very early age, as young as 3, 4 years old. White kids are taught through messaging and other ways, it's in the media, it's in every aspect of our lives, that you have the privileges that other people don't have. And that's true. You know, I just turned 50 years old. I was born in 1970. The Civil Rights Act was not enacted but 5 years before I was born. Black people didn't get a guaranteed right to vote in this country until 1965. I was born in 70. So we treat things like it was a long time ago. But my parents had to go through being threatened with their lives if they wanted to exercise their right to vote. My parents, this is not, Black people in this country were enslaved more years than we've been free from slavery. And so what happens with the American psyche, I believe, is that we want to feel good. We like our traditions and we like our memes. And that is where that comfort, like your comfort has a cost. It comes with a price. And because you're comfortable, you never see the price that's being paid because it's there for your benefit. But underneath that comfort is a lot of discomfort for someone else. And that someone else tends to be Black people in this country. It has been. I always tell people I'm a disruptor just by nature. And I tell people things don't have power unless you give it power. And I've always been, do you want to know why I make popcorn?
Why? Tell me.
Because I was tired of dealing with racism in the workplace. That's underlying everything else. I have 6 degrees. 6.
Wow.
I have 2 master's degrees. I mean, there's a lot, you know, of course I went through an illness, but I had a choice to make at some point. Do I just jump back into the workforce or do I don't ever, let me tell you, this is a real conversation. Let's make it as uncomfortable. You ask me whatever you want and I'll do my best to answer. I know where your heart is, I believe, and I know it won't be coming from a mean place. And I'm the same way. I love you. I love you because you're a human being, because you're a creation of our Creator. I don't need any other reason to love you. But I can tell you with all sincerity, I said to myself, especially after an experience I had being in the workforce here in Texas and experiencing unbelievable discrimination, I said, I will never work for another white person again as long as I live. And you guys need to know that those conversations actually happen. And it's not because I'm mad at, you know, like I said, but because the racism is so unchecked. Racism depends on each individual making a choice whether or not they're going to see me as a full human being or not. Can you imagine how exhausting that is?
No.
How many people you deal with and how many times you got to come up against, do you see me as a human being or do you see me something less than? In a day? In an hour? It's not okay.
No. Yeah, and I'm appreciate you going there because again, this is the uncomfortable part of it is like, what kind of pain does this cause? And you're right, not everyone's empathetic, but we're both, I don't know if optimist is the right term, but we're both believing in change. And yeah, I did not know that was the reason why you stepped out of the workforce and started.
Well, I would never normally voice that out loud to anyone outside of the people who are like like right here in my life with me. You know, I would never say that out loud, but it's the truth because I was discriminated against so badly. And it's like, we deal with this. It's not just me. There's no one that doesn't deal with this. You could be a doctor and the CEO of a medical system, and you're going to have subordinates who refuse to acknowledge your authority in a professional sense because they don't like the color of your skin.
My question for you, because each one of those moments is different, but what do you said we deal with it. What do you do with the pain that causes? How do you deal with it?
You know, there have been studies about it. People wonder why life expectancy is lower for Blacks, and they just assume because we make bad choices. It's stress.
Yeah.
And you know what? Here's a shocker. I mean, we like being Black. Our culture is rich. We add a lot to the fabric of this country. America would not be America were it not for the contributions that we also made to it as a people. Black people don't walk around going, oh, I wish I wasn't Black. We love it. We get together and we have our own worlds that you never have to know anything about because you have the privilege and the luxury of not having to. I can't get away from you. You can go weeks and not see a Black person or talk to a Black person if you choose to. I can't go a day without having to interact with someone white. And then what happens is, depending on that particular person has the right and the authority in their own mind and in the way our country is structured. They can choose how they treat me based on skin color in any particular situation, in any particular moment. And I don't have the luxury of not knowing that because it could cost me my life. It could literally, and you never know where it's coming. You never know. You could go into the same establishment for years and always have a wonderful experience. And then you can go in one time, and that one time with that one person who might be having a bad day or who had a bad experience or whatever is going on personally in their lives, and they could just hurl the N-word at you like it's nothing. And you got to figure out what to do with that in that moment.
You now.
Hmm?
Yeah, now it's on you. They're all there. Yeah. It's on you.
Yeah. You could be at the gas station pumping gas. I can't tell you, there's no one who doesn't suffer the slings and arrows. And people go, well, why don't you just ignore it? Again, that's a privilege we don't have. This is not something we want. And the interesting thing is, race is a man-made construct. It's not science. Look at 1793, Carolus Linnaeus, a botanist of all things, a man who studied plants, wanted to curry favor with the courts, with the English hierarchy, who was grappling with colonization, because it was starting to be conversations about, you know, we're going over the world, we're conquering all these Black and brown bodies, we're pillaging, we're taking their resources, we're not paying them anything for it. Is this right? Carolus Linnaeus came up with a hierarchy of humanity based largely on skin color. The whiter you were, the more human you were. The darker you were, the less human you were. And the thinking was, well, the darker you are, you're not really human. So therefore, we don't have to worry about what we're doing to them in their lands because they're not really human anyway. You look this up, it's true. Not making this up, 1793, Carolus Linnaeus. And that has stuck since then as a hierarchy. That's why when you answer a government document, it doesn't say, it's not supposed to say race. It says, how do you identify? Do you identify white? Do you identify Black? Do you identify Asian? Because it's a man-made construct. There's no science behind it. And yet there's so much to unpack. There's so much psychology behind it And I don't want to, I mean, but you guys, you have to do the work. I can't cure your cancer. I can't make you eat the right foods that go into your body to heal your spirit. I can't do that. But all I can tell you is we're tired of being on the receiving end of that sickness. As a people, we're tired of it. We built this country, our ancestors built this country for free. We were the first commodity of the United States. We were how people obtain wealth. Wall Street is called Wall Street because they used to put the slaves up against a wall, and that's where people would come and bid on slaves. The first commodity. Wall Street in New York City, the New York Stock Exchange, is called Wall Street because that's where slaves were lined up and bought and sold. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Guess what? That's exactly what you have, the luxury of not having to know that. I don't have the luxury of not knowing that. And this is, I mean, it's true. We were the first commodity, and then we became the comfort, you know how hard it is to take your worst pain, something that you lost, something that should not have been taken away. And then imagine other people wrapping themselves up in that pain for their pleasure.
And that's the best, I guess that's the best way to make it hit home of what the pain of racism is like.
Yeah.
I think, no, I wanted to get just a glimpse, and I appreciate you going to a painful spot and talking about going into a cafe and being called a word you should never be called, a word that you never, one that you inherited, not because of anything other than man-made hatred.
Oh, it could be way worse. It could be, you could be spat on. You could be, I'm a woman. When I get stopped by the police, my heart is in my throat. I've been profiled. I've been harassed by the police before. I'm a woman. Anyone who knows me knows that, you know, it's me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
and I mean, I've been pulled over because I don't, you know, why are you in this neighborhood? I've been stopped down the street from my house and been asked by the cops to prove that I live there. You know, we all have these experiences.
Yeah, so I wanted to go to the pain portion of it because actually the exercise you did of imagine something that was taken from you, that hurt, you lost too soon, and then someone else using that for pleasure is a very profound. I think that is, yeah, who would insult my dead grandmother at any moment of the day? You know, no. Yeah, so I think that is a very helpful framework to begin to just wrap our heads around it. What I'd like to do next is ask you what you think about a word. I'm going to say a word. I want you to know. I want to know what comes to mind when you hear that word in this context.
Okay.
Of race in America. And that word, it's going to be equally as challenging as the pain conversation, but that word is reconciliation.
What do I think of when I hear that word?
Yes, ma'am.
Hope. Because it's really not that hard, because you said it in the beginning. Most of us, I believe, it's kind of weird because I used to think that number was higher than it actually is. And what politics, the current politics of the times is really showing is that a lot more people want to maintain power. They don't want to share power. They want to hold on to power at any cost. And I would have assumed that number was lower until recently. That number is way too high. And there are way too many people who profess to be Christians doing it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I do still believe that the majority of us, we just want to live our lives. We want to live our lives. We want to be happy. We want to see you be happy. We want to live in, in this great land and live out full, happy lives and help out when we can and pray for each other and love on each other. So that, not everybody participates in this craziness, but the unfortunate reality is, Tim, it only takes one.
That's true.
There could be 1,000 good cops and one bad one. And do you want to be on the receiving end of 1 in 1,000 bad cops catching up with you one day because your tail light is out? Because you're playing your music too loud and somebody doesn't like it and they call the cops on you? Police are weaponized for Black people. Police are a weapon used against us. And if you know the history of police, of how police forces were made, they are the original slave enforcers. Modern day police, that's the truth. It really is. And these are the things that they make sure you don't learn in school. History is propagandized. And I have to sit in class and listen to this. I've been kicked out of class before for challenging teachers. I've been suspended before for challenging teachers. Because I'm not having it. I'm just not. I've just never been a person that just, you can't go around fighting all the time. It's just, it wears you out. But, I like to read and I like to learn and I like to know, and I'm proud of who I am and who my people are. And sometimes I've been in history classes and been teachers of, the slaves weren't really treated badly. They preferred slavery. I had a history teacher say this in class. And I walked out and I refused to go back in his class. I went to the principal's office and sat outside the door. The principal came by and he's like, DJ, why are you here? Because I was always getting in trouble for something. I said, I'm never setting foot in that class again. And do you know I never did? Never did. They had to send my assignments. Little country town, but this is true. They had to send my assignments. I sat in detention for that period. I wasn't in detention, but that's the only place I could go. I chose to go sit in detention. They would send my assignments to me and pass them back to the teacher. And that was in the 10th grade. And when I graduated, that teacher came back and apologized to me and said that he came back just to see me walk the stage.
Wow.
And we had a good talk. And he explained to me, he said, this is how I grew up. Times are changing and I get that. And I want to change because I know I have to. And he goes, I want to thank you for holding me accountable because until you did what you did, I didn't see what I was doing was wrong. Wow. I called him a racist to his face. I tried to get the other kids to walk out, but they weren't as radical as me. They wanted good grades and I can't, but I was done. I was like, nope, not coming back in this classroom.
Yeah, and sticking to your convictions, your principles, you still got 6 degrees. I think it's worked out.
I've spent a lot of money. Yeah, but I make popcorn for a living, so there you go.
Well, it's delicious popcorn too.
Thank
it's
you.
not, Yeah.
I took you way off of what your question was. I apologize, but it's those
No,
kind of contexts, the reconciliation, that I
I'm,
wanted to make that point that it's possible because of, I'm not going to call his name, even though I could. I think he would be okay with it. And I haven't seen him or talked to him since I graduated high school. But the fact that he came back to have that conversation with me, it meant the world to me. So
I mean,
reconciliation is possible.
yeah, that's an example, and that happened in the 80s, right?
80s.
Yeah.
1988.
Come on, that was the year I was
Was that
born.
the year you were born? It's nice to know I'm old enough to be your mother. There you go.
Uh,
I didn't think I could possibly feel any worse. Thank you, Tim.
my mom loves you. She was at the same annual dinner, and she's a big fan of you,
Your,
popcorn, your spirit, all of it.
your whole family is just light.
Well, you haven't
That
met
was
one of
one
my
of the
brothers. I'm playing.
that was one of the best nights I've had in a very long time, and your family was just so amazing and so wonderful. You come from good stock.
Well, thank you. My parents will be honored for you to say that. I got one last question for you, and this is more of a message for a chance for you to have a message. Let's just say you could have every person in this country hear a message from that you're going to say, but they're not going to hear from you. They're going to hear it from someone who they love or care about, whether it's a parent, family member, spouse, whatever. They're going to come home in their house and say, listen to this, fill in the blank. If you could get that one message across, what would you want them to hear?
You've been lied to your whole lives. You're victims too. Because on one side, there were people telling my people we weren't good enough. And on the other side, they were telling you you were everything. And neither is true. Neither is true. And the only way to fix it is to do the work. You have to stop listening to people who have an agenda, who maintain power because they keep us divided. Learn something about your brothers and sisters who aren't you. There's a whole lot of history out there that you don't know anything about because you've never had to. Read Frederick Douglass. Read Langston Hughes. Read a letter from a Birmingham jail, like as an adult, where you can actually comprehend what was happening. They used to make us read it, think we were only like elementary school. It's a sophisticated manifesto. Read it. Learn about the race riots that happened in America in the late 1800s all the way through mid-20s. Learn how Black communities were destroyed. We had our own banks, our own churches, our own hospitals, our own schools, our own neighborhoods. And every time we built it, America allowed it to be destroyed. And that's the final thing I'll say. The important word is allowance. We are no better or no worse than what we allow. And as long as you say, well, I don't do that. But if you allow the people around you to do that, then you're part of the problem too. So if you don't want to be part of the problem, it's not enough not to be racist. You have to be anti-racist. You have to hold the people accountable in your life, in your circles, and you have to be a counter narrative to hatred. And that's pretty much that's the advice that I would give.
I love it. You got to do the work. Gotta
do the
work.
work.
Reconciliation always comes at a price. DJ, thank you for this conversation.
Thank you, son. I don't mean that, little brother.
Yeah, I'll take either. I'm just glad to be in the family.
Little brother.
I'll take anything. Yeah, I am very, I think I said this last week or a few weeks ago when we've talked about it. I'm very grateful that we met, and I don't think it's any coincidence. And really what I said on there is true. Like, people like us, we're everyday people. And this is the fabric of this country because we're everyday people in these communities. And this is where change happens. I am very fearful because you're right. There are 1 out of 1,000. There's going to be one bad person. No, but I can be responsible for what I can be responsible for.
I know we're going long, but I lived overseas for over 10 years. I lived in Germany. And I went there when I was 21. I was a kid and I was by myself. And in Germany, they have houses that have multiple floors. And the older you are, the lower level you live on. So grandma and grandpa lives on the first in the basement maybe, and then you have mom and dad, and then you have the kids, and if their kids get older, they live in the attic. So I lived in the attic of some of these houses, and lovely people, just lovely people. And I lived in a community, and there was a concentration camp not too far away. And there's this weird smell in the air sometimes. And I asked a neighbor once, I said, what is that smell? And they said, oh, that's the smell that comes from the concentration camp. It smelled like burnt flesh. And I was like, how could it still smell like that all these years later? And I'm like, you guys cook for me. You do my laundry. You're like, you pick up my mail. Like, you're lovely people. You've lived in this house. You lived here when those cattle cars were going past full of people. What did you do? How did you feel? Like, what did you do to stop it? And you know what they all told me? We didn't know. This is in the 90s. You could still smell the stench. In the 90s, I'm not making this up. The wind would shift and you would get this horrible, sweet, sick smell. And these people lived in these houses then. And they always said they didn't know. And the thing that taught me is that when you are faced with something bigger than you, it's easy to turn a blind eye to it and pretend it doesn't exist. But in the end, everybody pays for it. There's no way you cannot, it's not going to touch you too. And Germans learned to police themselves till recently. You couldn't fly a swastika in Germany. You didn't have to call the police to do that. The Germans would take care of it. The neighbors just wasn't allowed. And we need to remember, things happen in this country for good or bad. It is what we collectively allow. That is the only reason it happens. So if we collectively choose to make a better America and truly make America great, it will be because we collectively decide to do that. And if we want to tear it down and we want to allow certain people to tear it down, that's a choice too. And what Black people are saying is, we see you. No more smiling in our faces and, hey, I'm a good guy. And then we're watching what you do, not what you say. And we're going to hold you accountable for that. And we are asking you to do the same thing.
That's good. That's good. That's good medicine. Yes. Thank you.
I really love you.
I love you too, DJ.
I know. I'm like a fan, and I know you're like all red. I'm
No,
sorry for that.
no, you're making when
You're
you
just
gave
such an
that,
awesome guy.
you when you talked about that, about what we collectively allow, I was just thinking, I was like, DJ moves a little more popcorn. She has my vote. I think there's public life very realistically happening for you, if you want it afterwards.
I would much rather keep sharing love through popcorn.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
but we do have to be smart about the people that we choose to lead us, because it's a reflection of who we are and who we
that's what I'm
aspire to
saying.
be.
You, DJ. That's what I'm saying.
There's so much better than me out there. I just say, let's keep loving each other. It starts with us. And I know you live that. You really do. You're a good example. And the world's a better place because guys like you are in it.
You are
I mean,
too kind, and I'm a big believer in the grace of God. And any compliment you give me, that's where I'm putting it. But thank you, and I love you a ton. And I'm thankful we can have these conversations and talk about deep pains, and talk about differences, and talk about hope for reconciliation. This is
yeah.
good. This is healthy. And talk about things we don't necessarily have the answers to, other than do the hard work. And hey, there's still going to be a bad actor out there, because this is the world and evil exists. But this is, at the same time, like, I would rather, like you said, like, define it, clarify it, talk about it, rather than say, no, we don't know. We didn't know.
But the thing is, Tim, if people knew they wouldn't get away with it, that collectively we would not tolerate it, then it wouldn't happen as much.
You're right. You're
My kids
absolutely
deserve to live too. I have an autistic son. He has Asperger's. Do you know how worried I am that he gets pulled over by the cops for a rolling stop through a stop sign and he doesn't comply as fast as they think he should because he's processing, and he reaches for his hair and they shoot him and say, oh, we thought he had a gun? That's not okay. Stop letting people say that's okay. It's America. Look me in the eyes. It's not okay. It's not. It is not acceptable. The laws need to be changed. The way police interact with African Americans, it needs to change. It's do the work. Look at how many Black people get killed by the cops. And one more thing, for people who will say, well, what about Black on Black crime? That's a talking point. Statistically, every group of people have more deaths by other people in that same group. So more white people die at the hands of white people, more Black people die at the hands of Black people, et cetera, et cetera. That whataboutism, you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem. And if we start calling people out and shaming them if necessary, a lot of this behavior will stop, because people only do what they're allowed to do. We all do what we're allowed to do. And I'm telling you, like, real talk, I'm looking at other countries. I'm like, I love America. Don't get me wrong. I'm as just as American as anybody else, but I want to live somewhere where I'm welcomed, and I don't feel welcomed in my own homeland. I don't want my children living in this place if it cannot live up to the ideals that it prescribes. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Doesn't say white men. Doesn't say white women. But that is what has been implied for far too long. Harriet Tubman, Ain't I a Woman? Go read that speech. Nothing's changed. It's time for it to change. I'm done.
There we go. You're not done. You're just getting started. You're done tonight.
I know. It's just, But I live this. You know, this is, as long as you know me, like I will dare to correct you on one thing. When we first talked about, to me, that wasn't a conversation about race. That was a conversation about culture and inclusion,
Okay.
cultural inclusion.
Okay.
Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's just honoring the contributions of the other, that is also a part of America.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I give you that. Um. Yeah. Wow. Um.
This isn't going to make the tape, but there's this guy
Okay.
named Frank. And when I went to live with my grandmother, all the black kids told me, they pointed out Frank and they say, stay away from him. He's dangerous. Frank was 2 years older than the rest of our class. He'd been held back twice. And he was just a scary dude. Yeah, his uncle was the grand wizard of the KKK. His whole family was Klan. So all the black kids warn me, if you see him, stay away from him because he's dangerous. Guess what I did? I followed him everywhere he went. When he's like, there was always a seat next to him, like nobody wanted to sit next to him. So I would plant myself next to him and be like, hi. He'd scowl and he'd get up and he'd move away. I did this for months. Every chance I got, I followed this guy, just gave him what for. And then one day I saw him on the playground under the smoke tree, and I was on the other side of the playground reading. And I started to cross the playground to go harass him like I normally do. And I went, you know what? This guy's never going to change. Why am I wasting my time? I'm done. So I turned back around and I went and I sat down and I'm reading and I see this shadow. And I look up and there's Frank and he's smoking and he goes, hey kid, you're not going to harass me today? And I said, no, I'm not, because you're not worth it. And we had this huge argument, but it was a conversation. And I was like, you know what? Tell me something. Why do you hate black people so much? Because black people are this and they always do this and they're all that and they're all this. And he's just going off. And I said, Frank, is that me? Anything you just described, is that me? And I could see the wheels clicking. I'm like, I named a couple of other kids. Is that Jerron? Is that Nicole? Is that Cassandra? Is that any of us? I'm like, who told you this? You're just repeating things that you heard. Long story short, he became one of my best friends. And I got really sick when I was 17.
Huh.
And I was in the hospital for a couple days and they put me to sleep. I was in a coma. And when I woke up, Frank was there holding my hand and praying. He's the
Wow.
only one in the room. He was praying to God to make me better. And I woke up and I caught him. He's a tough guy. He didn't pray to God, you know? I caught him praying. He said, if you tell anybody, I will never speak to you again. I said, Frank, I'll keep your secrets. And he was like, he loved me and I loved him. I still love him. All these years later, Frank could call me tomorrow and I would be there I'd be so happy to hear from him. His family actually disowned him because they found out that we were friends.
Wow.
And he didn't tell me. I didn't find that out until years later because he moved away about 10 miles, but he would still drive himself. He stayed at our school. We still graduated together, but he got kicked out and he had to go live with his cousins. The last I heard, I talked to Frank. Last time I talked to him, it was in the early 2000s when I got back in country. I was living in Colorado and Frank and I connected and he married a nice girl and married a Mexican girl and had babies with her. And his dad his dad still refused to talk to him, but the mom would sneak away and come visit him.
Oh.
And he was working on his relationship with his dad.
Wow.
So when you say reconciliation, if you go to my LinkedIn page, I actually wrote about it years ago. One of my best friends was a card-carrying member of the KKK. That's the
That's the
the
ray of
goal.
sunshine through the clouds. That's what that is.
And I will go to my grave loving Frank, because he was there for me in so many ways, and he allowed me to be there for him. And we were just friends, but we were really friends.
Yeah.
Like it was not a superficial friendship. It was real. It was life altering. And so I know it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know firsthand that it's possible. Frank, if you ever get to see this, I love you.
Yes. There we go. It's making the tape now. You said this one doesn't make the tape, but now it's making the tape.
Wherever he is in the world, if you ever get to see this, buddy, I love you for life.
Yeah. Well, again, DJ, thank you. I'll get to work on this with my crew, and I'll let you know when we end up having it ready to go. They tell me, they're the pros. But
I just hope it's usable.
yeah, well, thank you for being flexible and making it work. And yeah, I will talk with you soon. And I look forward to when we can go to y'all's cafe and eat again.
We got to do that.
Yeah, glad to be going through a pandemic and a change in race with you, just in the way this country views race. I mean, literally when the pandemic hit and we spoke on the phone, I couldn't. That feels like a lifetime ago, and it is just 3 months.
God's working.
Yeah, he is. Just overdrive.
Hey, Tim.
Yes, ma'am.
I love you.
I love you too, DJ. I love you too. We'll talk soon. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.